Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Today's episode is brought to you by Practice Better. As a registered dietitian or health practitioner, do you ever feel so frustrated by the technology and the 18 different platforms that you have to use just to communicate with one client? It's like you need a way to host sessions, a way to chart, a way to invoice, to email, a way to schedule appointments, manage a calendar, send documents, etc., etc. You've got 20 different tabs slowing your computer down. Meanwhile, you lose your mind and you've got sticky notes thrown all around your office. Am I right? I've been there before too, but guess what? Practice Better solves that. As a registered dietitian who manages dozens of clients at any given time, Practice Better has been my solution to having a one-stop shop for everything I need to manage my clients and my business. I've been using Practice Better since the inception of Rise Up Nutrition, and I have only good things to say. It is the complete nutrition practice management platform for health and wellness professionals, complete with client management, scheduling and booking, billing and payments, programs and courses, telehealth and messaging, integration with food journals and exercise logs, supplement dispensaries, and more. If you are a registered dietitian, health coach, or anything in the health field looking for a better way to manage your practice, try Practice Better. To help support this podcast, do so by clicking the unique Practice Better link in the show notes to learn more and sign up. By clicking that link and using the code RISEUP20, you will receive 20% off your first 4 months on any paid plan. Yes, 20% off your first 4 months. Also, this is in addition to your first 14 days as a free trial, so you can explore all the features of every plan option. Remember to click the link in the show notes to support the podcast, then use the code RISEUP20, RISEUP20. Okay, let's get to the show. Hi, fans and listeners. It's Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, your host of the podcast and owner of Rise Up Nutrition. I'm here today with a wonderful guest, Corrine Malcolm. She is a coach, physiologist, writer, and newly minted editor-in-chief for Free Trail. She's a podcast host and a professional runner for Adidas T-Rex. She takes after her mom in that she has to do a little bit of everything. She's vexed many teachers, coaches, and parents with her need to know why. But that same impulse drives everything she does. Corrine has been an NCAA athlete in skiing and running, a national team member in biathlon and trail running. She's dropped out of college twice, coached endurance sports for a decade, and most recently, she helped launch live broadcast commentary for trail and ultra running at races like WSER and UTMB. Corrine has a degree in health and human performance and a master's degree in environmental physiology. Corrine, thank you for joining and having this conversation with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I was like, ooh, yes, I have vexed a lot of people over the years.
No, that's awesome. And I actually really loved your bio that you sent over to us and just your honesty of, this is me and what I've done. And I'm super excited to talk to you today. You're very familiar with podcasts. You co-host a podcast yourself, Trail Society podcast. And how long, and I've mentioned that before, we had your co-host, Keely Henninger, on this one in episode 85 for anybody who wants to listen to that as well. How long have you been doing Trail Society?
We've made it past the 1 year mark as of earlier, I guess late September, I think, was our 1 year mark. So we feel pretty proud that we've given, there's 3 of us. So it's myself, Keely, and then Hillary Allen, aligning our schedules, aligning our lives. It's been a really, really fun project. And it's cool that I think we're going to see it well into the second year and beyond.
Absolutely. This podcast is going into its third year,
so cool.
Actually, probably by the time this is, and it's like really exciting to see it grow, it's like where the conversations lead and just how it grows and everything. So congrats to the three of you and getting a year into it, and definitely want to give it a shout out as a good one to listen to, especially as trail runners. The three of you are yourselves trail runners.
Yeah.
So yeah, awesome. So let's start, Corrine, with sharing with our listeners more about your athletic journey. We mentioned you're a trail runner, but you were also an NCAA athlete on a national team for biathlon, which is the sport of skiing, cross-country skiing, and rifle shooting at the same time. I'm really interested to hear how you got into that, maybe where you grew up, just that wasn't something I was exposed to growing up. So can you share us a bit about kind of when you started running, when you started skiing, and what that journey was like for you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, people are like, biathlon, you mean triathlon, right? Like the swimming and the running. And I'm like, no, it's a winter sport, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up predominantly in northern Wisconsin. My parents were in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot when I was really little, but spent most of my childhood in northwestern Wisconsin. Cold, wintry place, small town up near Lake Superior, and have always been a super athletic child, a super competitive child. I'm the oldest with two younger brothers who I've made race me since they were big enough to walk, I think. So prototypical, maybe bossy oldest child, making my brothers race me across parking lots, and wanted to make sure I won, obviously. But,
of course,
played all the sports. I think the only sport I didn't play growing up was volleyball. Parents were super supportive of us trying a little bit of everything. And I really appreciate that I know now parents feel a lot of pressure to put their kid into one sport or play soccer year round or swim year round or whatever it is. I know that is very much the norm, I think, in US athletic development from like a youth perspective. But I played soccer because we grew up in the North Woods. We did like lumberjack sports growing up, like log rolling and that kind of stuff, which is super weird. And then you would ski in the winter, play softball or baseball in the spring and summer. So really just had a passion for being outside, but also I think the competitive nature of sport really just like, I don't know, I got it really early. I think my mom said, as a U10 soccer player, I was picking flowers, but as a U12 soccer player, I was like in the game. And that really, I think, developed a love for, pushing my limits. And we didn't have a middle school track and field or cross country team. I know a lot of programs now do, but we had like, field day. Field day was like the best day of the year for me growing up. I had so much fun doing it, but started running on the cross country team and the track and field team in high school, but was convinced I was a sprinter. Like cross country was like a real push for me. I was like, I run the 400. I don't know what you're talking about. But then I got hurt actually a bunch kind of early on running, just like growing kid syndrome, very typical like early high school athletic development injuries when you introduce a new stimulus probably too fast. And because of those injuries, they're like, maybe you should ski in the winter. Like you probably should like take a break from the impact over the winter months. Why don't you join the ski team? So I joined the cross country ski team in high school and honestly did not love it right away. Like kind of hated it, was not good at it. Like naturally was a pretty good runner, was not a natural skier at all. There's a lot of technique and a lot of timing and rhythm. And a lot of kids start skiing super, super young. You talk to someone like Jessie Diggins, who's now the most like decorated US skier of all time. She's been skiing since she could walk type of thing. Wow. And a lot of my peers were in that same boat too. And I was like, a 13-year-old being like, this makes no sense to me. Like, I don't like it. I don't get it. Running is easy. There's no gear. I hate this. And then my best friend joined the team. She's a year younger than me, joined the team my sophomore year. And that like really clicked because all of a sudden it was fun because I had this person with me to go through the ins and outs of practice every day. And so, grew up in a town where being a 3-sport athlete was really important. We were kind of expected to play a different sport every season. And that might seem intense, but I think it honestly was really good from like an athletic development standpoint that it kept us out of trouble. It kept us busy and we did get to do a little bit of everything and we weren't pressured or forced into early specialization either.
Yeah, no, I think my high school was kind of like that too, or just my town of one, the importance of doing sports, even if, you weren't necessarily a great athlete or loved it. It was like, this is a social thing, keeps you out of trouble. And it was every season was something different, you know? My school did have indoor and outdoor track, which is kind of like the same. I mean, it's a different sport, but it's kind of the same. But otherwise, like it was something we did too. So you didn't love skiing until your best friend joined. And at what point were you like, whoa, I'm actually really good at this, despite other people doing it since they were 2 years old or whatever?
Yeah, I think I got lucky that I think I have a predilection for being very strong. Like I joke that my family is designed to like carry sheep and dig potatoes, and skiing has a huge strength component to it, where we do a lot of stuff in the weight room. And that clicked for me like right away, like really, really enjoyed that. So I think I got a little bit lucky in that while maybe I wasn't very coordinated, I had an engine and was very, very strong as a young athlete, probably earlier than a lot of my peers in that regard. And then I think it was between maybe my sophomore and junior year of high school, they do regional elite group camps for skiing, where they kind of, in each of the regions across the country, they put together like a summer week-long training intensive. And for the Midwest, it's predominantly Minnesota and Wisconsin skiers. I think we had a couple people coming out of Chicago, or like the Chicago area as well, down in Illinois, but we got together once a week, and the camp was held in my hometown, and my high school coach was kind of responsible for putting it together. And then the US ski team coaches would come in for the week. And I think I probably wasn't supposed to be there, but I think this guy, Bill Pierce, like saw something in me and knew like I hadn't made like the junior national team, or like the regional junior national team that season. I had just missed it. And so I think I got really lucky in the sense that he was like, it's happening in Hayward, like where I grew up. Like we'll let Corrine come. Like we'll squeeze her in. And so all of a sudden I got to spend a week with like people who enjoyed the same thing as me, who, it wasn't just me and my best friend. It was me and my best friend and like 40 new best friends from Minnesota and Wisconsin. And, we did time trials and, while you might not excel in everything, like we did a running time trial, a skiing time trial, like a roller skiing time trial, and a strength test. And like, I did really well in the strength test, and I did really well in the running time trial, and like, okay. In the skiing one, I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's not, like we all have our strengths. Like, I think saw a little bit of shine in that moment of like, oh, I can hang with these kids. I don't know what I'm doing, and they've been training in a very different way than I have, but I think, I can be here. And Matt Whitcomb, who is the US ski team, one of the US ski team coaches at the time, gave some motivational speech. And at the end of it, like my friend and I were like, we're going to the Olympics, like for sure. And so, it's like right place, right time phenomenon. And, whatever a motivational speech from a US ski team coach does to a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, you're like, oh, I'm in, like I'm committed to doing this thing now.
And you were training for the Olympics, but in biathlon. So when did the shooting come into play? And is that something you did as a family, like sport kind of growing up or something?
Yeah, it's kind of comical because I joke that like I got my hunter safety permit when I was 9 because growing up in the Midwest, I like went to Boy Scout camp with my brothers and we shot BB guns and that kind of thing. But I went to Montana State to ski and was on loan to the running team. So ran cross country, but didn't have to go to the practices, which irked a few individuals, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
But I was like, I'm training really hard. I just, they were always like short a person because someone was hurt. Someone had to stay back to do something. And so I got picked up to come along to a lot of stuff, but moved out to Montana to ski and really loved Bozeman and loved our team, but was qualifying for NCAAs, but not getting to go because in skiing, you can only bring 3 men and 3 women.
Oh, wow.
And our team was good enough that we'd qualify 5 women. Or 6 women, and you only get to bring 3. And our coach really believed in like this, like in seniority and putting in your time. And so as a freshman and as a sophomore, like I'm not senior in that group. And so felt jilted in a way and like was frustrated and wanted to get to travel, wanted to get to do sport more full time, and basically took an opportunity to do that. I got recruited I was still a junior for biathlon. I had like 1 more year as a junior athlete. So you could go to junior worlds and European championships, and got recruited by the junior development team coach. and said like, hey, like, why don't you give this a shot? So I figured it out with the NCAA clearinghouse. Like, I'm going to go do this thing for a year. It's not going to ruin my eligibility. And if I like it, great. And if I don't like it, like I can come back to school. There'll be a spot for me on the team, etc. So I did. I like packed up my car and drove from Bozeman, Montana to Fort Kent, Maine, which is basically in Canada, in northern Maine. So from one place to the next that has a bunch of moose, and like went all in. Like I wasn't being a very good student. I didn't feel like I was being a very good athlete. And so dropped out of college for the first time to drive across the country and ski in a circle and learn how to shoot a 22 because someone told me like, hey, you might be good at this. And I, once again, right time, right place, like taking advantage of that opportunity.
Wow. So, and just to kind of put things in perspective, and listeners will understand why in a moment, but what year was that?
So I left school in 2010.
2010. Okay. Yeah. The reason I wanted to ask the timeline is because I know, and something I really want to get into with you today is your experiences with overtraining syndrome that I think you identified or started feeling it around like 2013. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I guess let's just start there in having you define for our listeners what is overtraining syndrome, and then, just kind of starting with your experiences of that, or when you think maybe it started to happen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's two big ideas here, right? That like training is best, physiological adaptation is best when you have adequate stress combined with adequate rest equals recovery equals adaptation, et cetera. It's what we want. But when those stress buckets get messed up, we have imbalances. We have our body isn't in homeostasis anymore. There's too much stress on the system to adequately get you back or better than where you were. And that can be physical stress, but that can also be psychological and emotional stress as well. And so I, jumped all into the sport, moved across the country, like rapid rise from the junior national team to the senior national team. No development pipeline in there at that point in time. Now there is, which is phenomenal to help athletes kind of move from, because there's no U23 group in biathlon. You're a junior and then you're a senior, which is a big jump for like a 20-year-old to make. Yeah. And so there was no safety mechanisms. And that's like kind of an important, I think, piece of that puzzle. But overtraining syndrome, I like to think of as being the end of a pipeline, or like the end of a train line, in which like there's normal training and normal recovery at the near end, like that's a station. And then you do a training camp, let's say, or a big training weekend. You've got a lot of stimulus. That's functional overreaching, right? Where you load the system. It's probably more load than normal, and you're going to need recovery afterwards, but you recover, and then you can, but it's more than normal training. And then further down the line would be like non-functional overreaching, where you've done more than you're supposed to do. Plus maybe there's added stress in your life, and a little bit of recovery or a little added recovery doesn't bring you back to normal. You have to take a little bit more rest to bring you back to normal. And it's non-functional because you're no longer making positive physiological adaptations to that stress, be it once again, physical or from other sources. And then overtraining syndrome is the far end. It's the final destination on that train line, in which, it's people, I think, oftentimes use it as a verb. And I think that's incorrect. Like I did a little bit of overtraining last year. Like it's not what overtraining is. That's like maybe you overreached, maybe you were burnt out, but like overtraining from like a diagnosis standpoint, from a how are we going to delineate this from other things standpoint, is that it's not a verb. It's a place. It's like you can't actively do it. You are now there type of thing. And so it's a little bit of rest, a week of rest, 2 weeks of rest isn't going to cut it. A month of rest might not cut it. Like you do need like a full kind of reset. And the struggle with something like OTS is that it's a diagnosis of exclusion, right? You gotta make sure you don't have mono or Lyme's or an autoimmune condition or being, anemic or have any sort of dietary issue. And that dietary issue piece, which I know is something that you actually like a space that you work in a lot, is that there's been some really great papers recently. And this is something I think we've always known. Like I was never amenorrheic, for example, while being in this state. So I had like enough energy that was not an issue. But when there's a lot of overlap between something like OTS or overtraining syndrome and what we know as like RED-S or REDS, with that being they're both They both take a diagnosis of exclusion. And, essentially we could say you probably don't have overtraining syndrome if there's a dietary component. And by dietary, just meaning like having energy deficiency. So that's, they have very similar symptoms and markers, right? Like it's very hard to tell the difference. But I do think that that's caused a lot of confusion over time. And it was only recently in the last 2 years where a good paper's come out kind of setting that stage up for people. And I really think that that's going to be beneficial for coaches and athletes and clinicians who all work in that space, because they take slightly different modes of therapy or recovery to, I think, really bounce back from.
For sure. So yeah, I want to get into this a lot, but I liked your explanation of you can overtrain for that day or the week, but that's very different than overtraining syndrome. And to draw the parallel to Red S, it's you can underfuel for a day or even underfuel for a week, but that's different than being in a state of Red S where we are chronically underfueled, and fueling better for one day is good, that's a start, but we've got a lot more to fix here. And I think the same thing with overtraining syndrome. Oh, you took a rest day? Good, that's a start, but it's going to take a lot more than just a rest day. So, and there is so much overlap between overtraining syndrome and Red S. And I think that you could be in a state of Red S and also be overtraining.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, there's probably some combination of these things for sure available to people. It turns out there's probably similar inclinations, or I think people who are at risk for one are likely at risk for the other.
Yeah, because of the nature of kind of what behaviors are you engaging in to get into this place in the first place. Yeah. So going back to you and your personal journey with overtraining syndrome, and this may be just in hindsight too, do you think there was a nutritional component for you, or do you think that your nutrition actually was okay?
I think my nutrition was relatively adequate, but I do think that if I look back to some of the other things going on, some kind of weird anemia stuff, I think I was getting in enough energy, but I think that it was lacking in certain qualities. I don't think I was eating enough protein. And I think that's a thing that a lot of athletes struggle with indefinitely, unless you're really kind of paying attention to it. Actually, I think my friends who are vegetarian and vegan do a better job just because they have to think about it.
They're paying attention to it.
Yeah, they're paying attention to it actively. And I'm just oh, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah.
So I think that moving into an Olympic training center in which you're in a cafeteria setting that, I grew up in a place where it's we knew where everything we ate came from. We had chickens and we hunted venison, and my dad's a family practice doctor. And so his patients would bring him beef that they had grown, type of thing that they had raised and on their ranch down the road from us. So I think that I went from a place of eating locally, eating stuff that I really connected with, to being in a cafeteria setting and while for some reason that wasn't really an issue while I was in college, that became a more pronounced issue when I was in this Olympic training center. And I think there was a fishbowl aspect of it where you're just kind of observed, in a constant state.
Interesting. Yeah. So there, nutrition certainly wasn't the leading issue for you, but it might not have been optimized. We can, in hindsight, kind of reflect on that. And if you could go back, in what ways do you think it's just that, being more comfortable in the dining hall and focusing on protein? What are some ways that you think your fueling could have been better in that situation?
Oh, it's things I'm still working on. I'm I joke that I'm a bad athlete all the time because I don't, in part from being overtrained, I've tried to take a pretty lackadaisical approach to running for a number of years now, which has not been helpful.
But it makes sense.
It was helpful initially, right? Because if I don't care, it can't hurt me. But turns out when you don't care and you run a lot, you can still get hurt. So, something else will break. I wasn't doing a lot of little things in that sense. It's really easy to drink a recovery drink. It's really easy to do that. And nope, not something I did at all. So I ended up moving out of the Olympic Training Center partway through my time there for a lot of those reasons though. Just I needed my own space. I needed my own space to decompress at the end of the day. I needed I needed, like my like roller skis, almost like a bunch of my like key sports equipment, like didn't even live in my like little house that I lived in. I like left it at the training center so that I was coming home. I was like, oh, it allowed me to leave work at the office.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, right? Where it was like, I leave my things here. I come to this place to do the thing. And then I go back to my place that is devoid of those things. And I'm a different human there, which in hindsight, like I'm really impressed with my like 22-year-old self, like, and the ability to like recognize that I needed that. But I think a lot of the food stuff kind of was tied up in that as well, like getting to cook for myself again and putting myself in a position where it's like, I enjoy cooking. So having that, like having a kitchen available to me, I think was really, really valuable in that sense. And I can live in those cafeteria environments for a training camp or for a meal, I'm having lunch with my teammates type of thing. And it's nice because I don't pay for it. And it's like, oh, I can take a whole sleeve of bagels home with me if I want.
Yeah.
I think that being in that environment 24/7, like kind of feeling like you're living in a retirement center where you like walk down the hall, you got a roommate and then you like walk down the hall to the cafeteria together every day. It's weird to have a bunch of, 20 and 30 somethings living in that environment constantly.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And I think for whether it's a training center like this or college students for sure in the dining hall, there's a lot to be grateful for in a dining hall. You don't have to spend the time cooking. You don't have to grocery shop. Money can vary, I know, with how much meal plans might cost or if it's free, but it's like, there's a lot of convenient things about it. But then there's also something about making your own food and just holding yourself accountable for it and being excited about it. And especially if you are somebody who enjoys cooking, it adds value to your life when you're doing it yourself too. So I think there's pros to both, but I can see how being in that situation all the time is really difficult.
Yeah. As opposed to you're walking to the dining hall and you're like, okay, what's available to me today? Cause like the hot foods are going to change every day. They've got the staples there, pretty consistently, but it's like, okay, like, what's speaking to me? What do I want to eat? It's a little bit harder, I think, to listen to your body in those settings because it's not
intuitive eating and listening to cravings and stuff like that isn't as easy. Yeah.
It's like, these are my two options. What would I like to partake in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey fans, I hope you are enjoying this conversation so far and we'll be back to it in just a moment. But first, I want to pause and let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Female Athlete System of Transformation, aka the Fast Track to overcome disordered eating and use food as fuel to perform at your highest level. The Female Athlete System of Transformation is my unique program and proven systems to guide female athletes to understanding and implementing the proper nutrition for their sport, life, and health. Myself and my team of registered sports dietitians work one-on-one with clients to address their unique needs and counsel them through the nutritional and behavioral changes needed. Many female athletes who resonate with disordered eating, mental guilt around food and body, relative energy deficiency in sport or female athlete triad, amenorrhea, repeat injuries due to negligent nutrition, or frankly, just a lack of knowledge and understanding on their fueling needs, have seen incredible success in the Fast Track. After years of working as a sports RD, I've compiled the most effective ways for female athletes to learn nutrition, be supported, be challenged, and ultimately find their success with fueling as fast as possible. So don't wait another day. Get to your goals faster by joining the Female Athlete System of Transformation. Look in the show notes or head to the website to book a free call and learn more. Okay, now let's get you back to the conversation. Enjoy.
Okay, so I got a little sidetracked there asking you about your food situation, but I want to go back to like, what did overtraining syndrome feel like for you? There's things you could have done better with your nutrition, but that maybe wasn't really what was wrong. Like when did you start thinking something's wrong with me? And why did you start thinking that? Like, what were you feeling and experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I was in an environment where I was like a 21-year-old training with people that were 10 years my senior and just kind of expected to keep up. So there's like a lot of flaws in that system where it's like there's kind of a program for the group of you. And while, I've had to run group trainings for youth and junior athletes and whatnot, like, you kind of have to make a plan and try to vary it when you can for people. But like being in a high performance environment with that model, I think was a little bit was a little bit hard because I wanted, I'm a competitive human. I wanted to keep up. I wanted to show that I had a spot on the team and I was supposed to be there, et cetera, and so on. But there were a lot of other factors too, right? I'm in a brand new environment, which is stressful. You're in that fishbowl environment where it kind of feels like every day is a test, and the finish line's just continuing to move away from you because your teammates are also getting better. It's like a time trial that never ends as you're chasing. And I had been in a relationship with one of my teammates at one point and we'd broken up. And so there's this turmoil, psychological stress of being in that environment. I had an injury during that point in time where it's I had to do a lot of ultra training. I had fallen and hurt my shoulder in a training session. We had a lot of coach turnover that on the ground due to various reasons. And so it's we didn't have a lot of consistency or oversight in that regard as far as someone checking in on us and just being hey, are you good? And I remember, I felt like I had a lot of, one, I was just I'd go to put my shoes on to go for a jog and it was really hard to make the jog happen. Or I wouldn't get past putting my shoes on type of thing. Or I think I definitely felt a lot of the psychological symptoms as well. I'm not a person who, I definitely feel full spectrum of emotions. I get to be happy and I get to be sad, but was definitely, was dealing with depression and that kind of thing during that time. That's not something that I've struggled with throughout my life in a big way. And I remember because of that fishbowl environment, I didn't want to work with our team psychologist. And I went to the athletic trainers at the training center and I said, hi, I would like to talk to one of the sports psychologists that are part of the US Olympic committee. I need someone to talk to about life. And I was worried that if I had to go to my coaches about that and they had to go to, our team psychologist, that it would be kind of this controlled environment. And, I don't think that's how systems are designed necessarily to work. And I don't think there was anything malicious or there was no intent, malicious intent with how that was designed. But I just think as a young athlete where you feel that kind of pressure to succeed and pressure to show that you belong, that any sign of weakness feels like a weakness, feels like you don't want to show that. And so I think the psychological components of it were pretty profound. You're I can't sleep, but I'm really tired and everything. I'm sore kind of all the time for no reason. And so I wasn't recovering well psychologically, was dealing with symptoms, wasn't sleeping very well. And then was having underperformance and ended up ultimately dealing with kind of a weird kind of sudden anemia in which I'd never been anemic and suddenly wasn't absorbing iron well, which was kind of bizarre. It took a long time to kind of work around the system, but almost an autoimmune response in which it's oh, you don't absorb this thing very well anymore.
Interesting.
So performance declined. And that's a big thing too, right? You look for performance decline, right? When you're burnt out, you can still kind of pop really good performances, but when you're physiologically and metabolically injured, it's really hard to maintain any semblance of normal performance. And so was dealing with a very uphill battle as far as an ability to be at the level I needed to be at, to hit times I needed to hit, to keep up with said teammates, to time trial well. And then, additionally, we do a lot of heart rate work with skiing. I've worn a chest heart rate strap since I was 13 for workouts, which is not, you don't see that a lot in the trail running community. It's not something that many runners in that space do. But a heart rate thing you can look out for in that regard is, it's really hard to keep your heart rate low enough during easy workouts. And it's really, really hard to get your heart rate high enough during hard workouts. And so that's kind of just an indicator of chronic fatigue or chronic stress on the system that's not responding. Your nervous system isn't responding well to it. So the whole smattering, a little bit of everything going on in that space.
Yeah. I really appreciate how you said this is a physiological and metabolic injury, because I would imagine you probably grappled with this. I don't think I've ever experienced overtraining syndrome. I haven't. I'll just say that. I've had my bouts of, I might be overtraining, this week or this month. And I've also had my bouts of lack of motivation, but it's something that always comes back around with just a little time or a little rest or a little more fuel, whatever. But I really appreciate that you said this is a metabolic injury, because I would imagine many athletes going through this are struggling with the psychological side, saying why can't I just motivate myself? This is an easy run. This is an easy practice day. Why can't I just do it? And then you maybe finally do find that motivation to do it, but you don't perform well and it feels terrible and you're not recovering and you beat yourself up more with that. But it's like when you say this is a metabolic injury, like my body's not responding, my nervous system isn't responding. Well, there's in overtraining syndrome research, there's even like you were mentioning some blood biomarkers, like suddenly you were anemic. We can also see like elevated glucose, like weird wonky things happen because it is a metabolic injury. So I think that's, it's hard. Like you said earlier, this is a diagnosis of exclusion. Like we're saying, well, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. So then we're kind of left at the end of the day with maybe it's overtraining syndrome because it can present itself so differently and we can get there in 100 different ways too. I think if you're experiencing this, to keep that in mind of like, this is a metabolic injury and I truly do need to heal all of these different things. And that's why it can take so long to heal because it's not one thing you're healing. It's not, oh, I have a bone injury, I'm healing my bone. It's I've got to heal all these different things.
Yeah. And we've had the discussion of like, not all stress fractures are the same, right? Like if there's a metabolic underpinning for this stress, like this bone stress injury, like cross training like a crazy person isn't going to be beneficial because you have a metabolic injury as well. And I think that that's the big thing with overtraining syndrome is that it's not like, oh, well, I'm just going to go do something easy for an hour every day. It's like, well, no, like your system is so stressed out that like you can't do that.
That makes it worse.
Like you truly need rest and recovery. And it's like you walk the dog, maybe you're doing some yoga, but it's like, it's not an easy spin. It's not an easy run. It's like your cortisol is like going, totally haywire. Like you can't continue to introduce new stress to the system.
Yeah. So this might be sad if somebody's resonating with this might be sad to hear, but I'd love for you to share how long did it take you when you did decide I need rest or I'm going to step away from the sport? Like how long did it take you until you felt that this metabolic injury was resolved or healed?
Yeah. And that's an interesting question because I feel like it's probably come in waves a little bit. So I ultimately, like I withdrew like partway through Olympic trials in 2013 ahead of the 2014 Olympics. And I was at a place where it's like, this is just, I can't continue to do this thing. Like there are no returns happening here. And so, pulled the plug. I think that was technically fall of 2013 ahead of like that winter season, which would name the 2014 February Olympic team. And I took, a bunch of time completely off. I ended up going back to school in January of that year. So I just like leaned into work. Like I was working as a nanny and doing other things. So I worked and I made a rule for myself that I wasn't like, I lived in Bozeman. So you'd like walk to work or that kind of thing. But I made a rule that I wasn't exercising and I wasn't going to do anything if I wasn't invited by someone to go do it. So like if a friend was like, hey, like I'm going to like, and this was first I took months off. Like I took, that this was October. So I took November, December. I saw family, went home for Christmas, November, December, January, February, like basically completely off. And then like introduced social activity in which it's like, oh, my friends are going to go on an easy ski tour. Like, and they've asked me to go with, okay. Like my friend's going to yoga, I'm going to go with type of thing. But as opposed to like, it wasn't training, it wasn't exercise. It was like complete release of the reins. I'm not going to go do these things. And I think that went through, that whole next summer. This is the summer of 2014. That next fall, maybe I was like, like I can do a little bit more. So like a year later and then 18 months later, the next summer, I like casually did a little bit like more running, like casually it was like, ooh, like trail curious type of thing. So 18 months later, I was like, going to some local events and that kind of thing, but wasn't doing any big mileage, wasn't doing any big training, was just like kind of like, getting back out with my community. But 18 months of like, 6 months of very little to nothing, a year of a lot of nothing, 18 months of me being like, okay, I can kind of get back out with my community and then kind of continue to build from there.
Was this difficult for you or was it a relief?
It was horrible.
Okay.
It was, as soon as I called part of the selection committee to tell them that I was withdrawing from Olympic trials, I felt a huge amount of relief because it was like I'd been pushing and pushing and pushing. Like an anonymous donor helped me fly to the East Coast for the first half of trials that was held in August. And I was like, kind of beating my head against a wall, trying to make it work, trying to like make it work outside of like the national team support structure. I had moved back to Bozeman for my mental health. Essentially, I was like, well, I can, if I can train wherever I want, like I'm going to Montana, which ultimately meant that I did not get funding for the following year because I didn't stay out east. So trying to make it work. It was emotionally and socially more sustainable, but no longer financially as sustainable as it had been before. But it was the calling to tell them I was done felt like a huge relief. And then I don't think I missed exercise for a while because I was just so tired.
So tired, yeah.
And then when I started school, it was great because I just fed myself school time instead of
it's something else to focus on.
Yeah, I totally just replaced it with a new thing to focus on to finish my degree out. But I think that it took a long time for me to feel fresh and really enjoy movement. And it took, I think that relief was first. And then there was a while once I started to feel good again where watching the Olympics in 2014 was heartbreaking. And, I think there was even a part of me in 2018 that was like, oh, that's really sad. Like, I really care about all these people. And it's, that could have been me. That could be where I'm supposed to be right now. And it very much wasn't where I was at all. And so I think that is always hard. But I think that there was probably equal relief and equal kind of just sadness for you mourn the loss, you mourn that chapter akin to a normal injury where maybe you are removed from your sport for a time. It feels like you're kind of losing a friend. But I do think that relief was a good sign of this is the right call. Quitting things are not easy, but I think removing myself from this dream that I had pursued for a long time while it was very difficult was very much okay, I can focus on me. I can focus on other things. I'm not beholden to anyone else.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So around a year and a half into rest and recovery, you started casually doing some trail runs, trail curious, as you said. And so at what point, I guess, did you feel like I can actually do this more seriously again? Or was it just natural? It's just your motivation and desire just kind of increased?
Yeah. So I had a whole thought process behind it in which it was I'm going to sign up for some things and I just want to see how they feel. I want to see if I like it, if I want to be competitive, if I want to be competitive and therefore want to do the training that it might take to be competitive, or am I okay changing my goals or being okay competing or okay being out here without a performance aspect to it. So I had to really delve through those layers of what did I want? And was I willing to do the things to, have the outcome I wanted? Or did I need to readjust my priorities and readjust my goals to get to a place that was happy and healthy and, was pleasant, not pleasantly surprised. I think in my heart of hearts, I knew that I'd be oh, I like this and I can do the thing.
Yeah.
That being said though, it wasn't until I feel the last 18 months where I was oh, I think I can take this seriously because I think my, 2015, so my didn't really start racing until 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. It's a lot, number of years where I didn't feel during any of those times building into the trail community, building into the ultra community, I was, despite pursuing some professional contracts and being offered a professional contract with Adidas in 2019, the winter 2019, I wasn't ready to be a professional athlete or to take it seriously.
Yeah. To take on that responsibility.
Yeah. And to feel, be worried about the pressure, be worried about the am I going to like it? Or am I going to get hurt because I care too much type of thing? If I take this seriously, what does that mean? So I feel I skated through many years of trail and ultra, just, kind of in a way lackadaisical or in a way not serious. But like I said, there are other outcomes from that where it's oh, you do have to take care of yourself if you're going to ask a lot of your body.
Right. Running ultras is no joke. You're asking a lot of your body and your mind to do that and to train for it. So yeah. But Corrine, I really commend you for, I guess I'll just say, taking it slow or putting yourself first, continuing to reevaluate what are my priorities? Is this really what I want? Instead of just jumping into it, because obviously you're such a good athlete that you were getting professional contracts and things being offered to you, you could have back in 2015, 2016 been like, yeah, this is my new thing. I'm going to go for it 100%. And that's where, whether it's burnout or overtraining syndrome, like can just repeat itself. Right. So I think
100%.
You really learned from your past on how to, you know what, like this is my life, put myself first, reevaluate what are my priorities. Am I taking care of myself? Is this still fun for me? And really like, you know, yeah, I just commend you on, I guess, taking it slow.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to bite off more than you can chew or to have, you know, we'd say that, you know, your eyes are bigger than your stomach sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I think I mean, I work as a coach and with the Trail Society podcast as well. We spend a lot of time talking about some of these things, and it's this notion of like, I wish that I could protect other athletes from my experience. And, you know, when I see another athlete go through that, I'm like, oh, I know exactly where they are, or I know exactly what they've had to do to get to this position, and feel for them and want, you know, like if there's any way to bottle it up and be like, here's a tiny taste of it. You don't want this. This medicine is not good for you. I think that would be, you know, that I mean, I don't want anyone to have to experience like, you know, walking through that. And far too many people do for various reasons. And so I think being really open about it, and someone is like, oh, you're really vulnerable. And I was like, I think I'm just really authentic. Like, I'm not going to hide what I've been through or like add shame to being injured or to having to take time off or having to quit. I think that you can take a lot of pride from all those things. And I think that we're conditioned to like not talk about our injuries, to not talk about our hard times or difficult times. You know, most of us live via the Instagram reel of everything going really well all the time. And that's like not the reality for normal people or professional athletes who turn out to also just be normal people with a fancy contract.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, I think we pretend that we're invincible, and that's, you know, we're telling ourselves a story of how smart we are and how good we are. And instead it's like we get lucky a lot. And I think it's really important to make people comfortable giving a voice to the things that are not always sparkly and shiny.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's why I thank you so much for this conversation. I don't think I've had a conversation really around overtraining syndrome on this podcast yet. And of course, like the conversations that you're having with Keely and Hillary on Trail Society, as well as like just being authentic about these things, because, you know, people are going to make their own mistakes, but maybe not as severely, or maybe they pick up on it quicker or
they
something.
Learn from our mistakes, or even like just recognizing that they're not alone, I think is the big thing there, right? Like, I have felt these feelings, or I'm currently feeling these feelings. And it's nice to know that you're not alone when you're wallowing in it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I guess like, I kind of just want to like hit on nutrition more, because I know that you are such a good role model for fueling and advocating for fueling, especially for, you know, training and the amount of training that you do. Could you share with us, like you mentioned in your past, you don't think that fueling was your main issue, was more the pushing your body to the limits, the psychological stress, although maybe nutrition could have been optimized. You know, what are some things, especially doing ultra races and trail running, what are some of your like nutrition priorities that you do focus on in order to take care of yourself and make sure that nutrition doesn't become a problem?
Yeah. And I think this is like, will hit home for people who have like busy lives and busy jobs, is like just prioritizing things. Like coffee is not breakfast is a big one. I know many of us probably fall into that category on some days where it's like, this latte is definitely breakfast. It's not breakfast. It turns out it's breakfast, maybe adjacent at times, but it's not breakfast.
Yeah.
So really like making sure that I put my best foot forward. Like I don't really meal prep. I've got normally enough time for like lunches and dinners, but it's kind of like the second breakfast where like I generally block my time so that I can train in the morning. And then I talk to athletes and people and edit stuff now for Free Trail in the afternoons, prepping articles. And so it's like, I block my time in the morning. So I get up and I make sure that I have snacks or food on hand that's easy for me to eat before I head out to the trail, or if I'm on a bike or whatnot, like making sure that I have that stuff set up. And then my meal prepping is more for like that second breakfast where it's like, I have something waiting for me when I get home. Otherwise it's like, you know, maybe I cut it a little too close and I'm like showering and immediately jumping on a call, and I don't get that like kind of very important meal. And sometimes that's a recovery drink at the trailhead. And then once I'm home, that's another thing though. It's like overnight oats or, some sort of chia, something or another, but, something that's got, protein and carbohydrates for me when I get home, because, I might be eating lunch at 1:30 or 2 in between calls, which is like not ideal if I've, had maybe a recovery drink at the trailhead, maybe if I've like remembered to pack things, come home and then all of a sudden don't eat again until 2. Like that's not good for me, not good for, trying to find protein throughout my day type of thing. So I think that that's been a big thing, is like just being better prepared to fuel myself throughout the day. Sometimes that's convenience things, and sometimes that's more like full meals. But then I think that, I feel like I've always done really well with the rest. Like I love cooking. And so dinner's really fun for me, having time at the end of the day to cook a meal with my husband, or we'll take turns cooking, that kind of thing. So I think it's the big thing, I think for me, was like the prepping the first half of the day food, because I feel like that's where I wasn't fueling well. And then I've talked a lot about this with Keely in particular of fueling on the run. Like oftentimes it's like, oh, I'm going for a 90-minute run, I don't need to bring anything. And it's like, well, if I bring stuff, like I'm coming out of this in less of a hole. And so making sure that, I do bring something on, even on a shorter outing, so that I'm taking nutrition on the run or on the bike, setting me up well for when I get home. Or even it's like the long run where you've got, 20 minutes left of the car and it's like probably time to take another gel. And you're like, well, I'm going to be in the car in 20 minutes. I don't really need this. And it's like, okay, like, no, like I'm going to fuel through the end of this workout and then I'll move on to the next thing. And then I think that the other big important factor, which was probably something I struggled with a lot when I lived in the training center and kind of through college, was that, your body's like your body and food's not like cashing checks. Like it's not this like constant, there's not like this constant balance that's going on. I feel like your needs fluctuate a lot day to day, but in a way where it's like, I think a lot of us on a rest day, on a low day, don't eat enough because we don't think we're doing anything that day. And in reality, it's like, well, I just ran for 6 hours over the weekend. So like my body doesn't know that it doesn't, like, my body wants fuel. It needs fuel. And like, it doesn't care that I might not be doing anything besides walking the dog that day. And so I think continuing to eat well throughout the course of the week, and not just, oh, I did really good on my long run day type of thing. I think I definitely fell prey to well, I'm not doing anything today, so I don't need as much. I'm not as hungry. I don't need to recover still. And it's like, no, it's a recovery day. You're still recovering from everything that you did over, the last couple of days, and everything that you're about to do over the next couple of days. Like you're setting yourself up for everything that's coming down the road. So I think that, my dietary approach is very holistic. I eat everything. I'm like a total sucker for ice cream. I have a lot of ice cream in my life, but I think the biggest thing for me was like putting in a little bit of effort to make sure that there is food going into my body between the hours of 6 a.m. and noon, because otherwise coffee became a meal, and coffee is not a meal.
No, it's not. But yeah, especially for people who are doing morning training, that morning fuel, it's so important. And yet it's so difficult to do, because if you've got work as well, like we're just so busy. And so I love how you called it, I think you called it like second breakfast, because it's like, okay, I wake up, I'm eating something, but this is really like my fuel for training, right? And so 100%. Some people might call that breakfast, but if that's breakfast, then you still need second breakfast. Or maybe that's pre-training fuel and afterwards is, real breakfast or whatever. And there was recovery in there too. Like you mentioned, like ideally it's maybe I have something at the trailhead and then I come home and I get that second breakfast. So I think, everybody's schedule is going to be different, but the struggle in the morning is real for a lot of people. And that's where we can wind up with, over time, just like, oh, we're constantly under fueling in the morning, and maybe we're not recovering well. Maybe we're dragging throughout the day. Maybe we find ourselves eating a ton at night because of it, or we find ourselves in that place months down the road of being in a state of energy deficiency and red S.
It's so easy, particularly for people who are trail and ultra runners. And I know we're just going to we'll keep just pushing this out, but it's, I think a lot of people who find themselves in that place of red S, it's not always intentional, right? It's like you are asking a lot from your body. You're doing a lot of stuff, and your body needs fuel for so many different reasons. And food is so much more than fuel as well, which is, I think, is really important. But this idea that I think Keely will has spoken to this with you, is that like, it's not always this like intentional limitation. It's like it's hard to eat enough sometimes. And like, if you're not being intentional in your eating, that I think that it's really easy to get behind and accidentally over time end up in that place of red S, because it's just, I don't know, peak training for a 100-mile race is like peak training for a marathon is also insane, but it's like, you can't, you don't, there's not as much wiggle room to mess up, I think, when we ask as much as we do of our bodies.
And so it's really important to stress the importance of this, of fueling, but also to just know for all of our listeners, like, it doesn't, even though we want to bring intention and attention to it, it doesn't have to be difficult, right? You don't have to meal prep everything. It can be through convenient foods. It can be through shakes. It can be through your favorite foods, even, it doesn't have to, but it does need to get done. The fueling needs to happen somehow.
It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it has to happen in some shape or form. And that's going to look different day to day, because life throws so many monkey wrenches at all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Your sentiment too about recovery days or rest days being a bit harder too. That's a big one that a lot of people resonate with. But yeah, just exactly what you said of remembering that, like, wait, my body's still recovering from yesterday and it's still preparing for my run tomorrow. And something that always helps me too is like the example you gave of, I just ran for 6 hours over the weekend, but like, I'm not today. Well, guess what? Like, the cells in your body don't know that. Like, you might know you're not going to go for a run, but like, your metabolism doesn't know that. Your metabolism is preparing for you to do this again, because
you keep doing
it. That's what you keep doing. Yeah. Every few days you go out on these really long runs. So it's like, it scares people when they're still hungry on a rest day, but it's like, no, because your body is preparing for the fact that you continually keep training, and it doesn't know that today's a rest day. It knows that you ask a lot of my body all the time, and this is the amount of fuel I need to sustain it, And so I like to think of that. I like to like personify the cells in my body, and they're just, sitting there with little smiley faces being like, are we going to run again? I'm hungry. Feed me now.
I love that so much. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, thank you for sharing like your priorities and stuff. And well, Corrine, we've been talking for a while, so I know we'll have to wrap this up, but thank you so much for just sharing like, your journey with sport and your experience with overtraining syndrome and dropping, lessons learned about nutrition along the way. I end every episode with the same questions for all of my guests.
I love it.
Yes. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
If there was one food you could eat every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
Probably sweet potato fries. I really love sweet potato fries. Yeah. I could eat them in a lot of different ways, I think, too.
I love that. I have a follow-up question to that. Do you like your sweet potato fries like with ketchup, or do you like them to stay sweet? Like, do you like brown sugar stuff on them? Or?
I mean, I think that's the beauty, right? You can go a lot of different ways. And like, I'm not afraid of a good aioli either. So I feel like they go with like mustard. There's so many options.
I know they're really good. I don't know why, but in my head, when I was first introduced to sweet potatoes and it was like served with like brown sugar and sweet things, like I didn't get that. So I was always like the savory, like I wanted it with the ketchup and aioli, but I've recently branched out and I'm like, no, it's really good with the brown sugar butter combo.
All of a sudden it's a breakfast food if you're adding brown sugar to it, I feel like.
Yeah. Fun. What is your favorite sport to participate in?
I mean, I think I'm biased and I'm supposed to say running.
Yeah.
Right? But I have been doing a lot of rock climbing and I really enjoy it. And I'm really bad at it. And I think that there's a lot of thrill in being like bad at something and like having to learn a new skill. So getting outside and rock climbing has been really, really fun.
Awesome. How about as a spectator? What's your favorite sport to watch?
I think my favorite, I'm not really a team sport person, although I grew up in Wisconsin and it's like a cheesehead state and my dad's from Philly. And so we watched like the Eagles and the Phillies growing up. So I was like, this isn't for me. I really love cycling in general. And so all the road racing that's going on and then all of the mountain bike racing, they do such a good job televising it that I have a lot of fun watching those races.
That's awesome. Great. All right. And then final question, is there a female athlete out there that for any reason at all you want to give a shout out to for being inspirational, whether well-known or just in your personal life?
I mean, it's like, I'm like, my mom, because I love her. Yay. I mean, truthfully, yeah, like she was one of those people, I was thinking about this earlier, who there are so many women who I don't think we ever got to see their potential or see them succeed because they were told that they shouldn't do sport or that sport wasn't a place for them. And my mom's not yet 60. I've got a young mom, but she, you know, was a phenomenal runner in high school. And like, I don't think ever really got the shine that she could have had later in life, but I feel like I won the lottery on the mom front because she was supportive of athletics and supportive of me I read somewhere recently, it was like the difference between like pushing or pulling. It was like she let me pull as opposed to push me. And so I feel like there's a lot to be said for like having a healthy relationship with your body and with food and with sport. And I think moms and dads are really important, or parents, right? Yeah. Whoever your parents are, or friends' parents who become your parents. I think like having someone like that in my life has been really, really important, even now as an adult.
That's awesome. So shout out to Corrine's mother for being a phenomenal athlete herself, even though maybe living during a time where she didn't get to shine as much as her potential showed, but being able to let your athletic potential shine through, you know, raising you and guiding you. So that's awesome. I love that one. Good answer. Well, Corrine, thank you again so much for having this conversation. It was a super nice one.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S Recovery Race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to our private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.